The performance of the mainstream news media in the coverage of Panama has been just about total collaboration with the administration. Not a critical murmur, not a critical perspective, not a second thought. When they interviewed people in Panama about what they thought of it, they invariably were interviewing white, middle-class people who could speak English. They didn't really go into the poor neighborhoods where people had been bombed. Did you see one media actually go into the bombed areas and talk to people who had lost a family or lost everything they had in the bombings?
The transport plane.
They focused totally on the invasion as a tactical event. Was it effective? Did it work well? Are we losing many American lives?
While another unit moved in by helicopter.
15 American servicemen have died in the combat today. Some of them quite
Not all the news is good. American casualties are now put at 15 dead and more than 100.
Also announced that one American civilian has been killed. That would make a total of 16.
Panama fighting is a school teacher, apparently hit by stray gunfire. Gertrude Candy Halen from Dixon, Illinois, is the 20th American to die in the fight.
They focused with utter ethnocentrism only on American lives. The only life that was precious, the only life that one could report on, the only life that one could consider as a serious loss was an American life.
Tonight, as we end this program, we hear from President Bush on the high price these young men paid, and we say goodbye to them.
Every human life is precious. And yet I have to answer, yes, it has been worth it.
The media was so cooperative with the government because the media are owned by the same interests that are being defended in Central America by that government policy. The media are not close to corporate America. They're not favorable to corporate America. They are corporate America. They're an integral part of corporate America. What they leave out are several other things. One is that Saddam Hussein was CIA. He was put in by the CIA. And CIA backed Saddam's right wing of the Ba'ath Party. And the Ba'ath Party went and murdered every Democrat, every progressive, every communist that was in Iraq, and then went and murdered the left wing of their own party. So they killed, tortured these people. They did all that. It's true what they say about him, that he did do these terrible things. What they leave out is that when he was doing them, he was Washington's poster boy, and they couldn't have more praise for him. But then he turned around and he did something else, and that was that he nationalized the oil reserves and fields. He actually got the idea that our oil, which is in his land, actually belonged to him. There's always the question, how did all of our oil get into Iraqi land? Well, why did we put it all there, you know?
What's good for General Motors is good for the country.
And what Saddam Hussein has proved to be is a nationalist also. He's using some of those resources for health clinics, for education of his people. Even though he's a right-winger and a militarist, he was a nationalist. So he was an economic nationalist, and they don't want that. They want a real, complete comprador leader in Iraq. The goal is to get this country back into this global, multinational, corporate, free market system. The other goal, of course, is the old-fashioned colonial issue, just grabbing the oil. There's 113 billion barrels of oil there at $40 a barrel. We're talking $3-4 trillion. And Saddam Hussein is giving concessions to the Russians, Chinese, French, Italians, Brazilians, and Malaysians. Dick Cheney and George Bush and their people don't own a drop of this. Now, if they go in and take over the country, they'll take over all this, and those contracts can be suspended. That's from a previous regime. They no longer have to be honored. You see, the Bush administration is not close to the oil industry. It's not friendly to it. It is. I mean, these guys are themselves oil men.
Why do you think Bush then keeps saying that we know he has weapons of mass destruction and he is an imminent threat and he has links to Al-Qaeda?
And he is not a democratic leader. He's a tyrant and all these things. He's saying those things to justify the attack against Iraq. Those are the same false pretexts that were used by his father to attack.
Remember this?
Took incubators and left the children to die on the cold floor.
Babies pulled from incubators and scattered like firewood across the floor.
Everyone believed this story. But there were no babies thrown on the floor. This woman turned out to be the daughter of the Kuwaiti ambassador and coached by their PR firm to tell this story.
The United States never had mass prosperity throughout its history. It was just a period from 1946 to 1980 where the prosperity was really, it looked like it was just going better and better and better for everybody. And that came after World War II, with the backlog of tremendous earnings from war industry and such. The GI Bill that came in that developed a whole new big professional class and the like. And that lasted till about 1980. Since then, there have been cutbacks to human services, cutbacks in educational opportunities, and greater inequality. Since 2000 to 2008, the inequality between the very rich and the rest of us, that inequality is greater than it's been throughout the 20th century. So we're back to like 1900 in terms of inequality. Everybody just can't make it. Throughout history, the rich have always argued that the poor are the authors of their own poverty. They're poor because they're stupid, they're disreputable, they're hopeless. People are poor because they are paid less than the value that they produce. You need poverty. Poverty is needed if you're going to have wealth. The only way a rich slaveholder, a Roman senator, or antebellum plantation owner in the South, the only way they can live in this fabulously luxurious mode is by having slaves who work from the crack of dawn down into the night. That's expropriation. That's creating the poverty of the slave or the serf or the worker so that the slaveholder or the lord, the feudal lord, or the plutocrat, the capitalist, can really accumulate wealth. The plutocracy, those very wealthy people, it's about 0.04, one fraction of 1%. It's less than 1%. When you hear, oh, the top 1% owns 40%, it's less than 1%. It's about 145,000 individuals. They make up this super rich class. You know, Gore Vidal was telling us that when Ronald Reagan went rushing over to the Bohemian Grove and said, I want to crack at the presidency now. I'm governor of California, it's my time. They said, no, Ronnie, you got to wait. 1972, that's going to be tricky dick. Richard Nixon. He stepped back. He wasn't going to take on the power of the wealth. He's serving that power.
Mr. Reagan is for freedom, and he is for the people.
When people talk about the rich in this country, they really don't seem to have any idea how rich the rich really are. The very top is that fraction I just said of 1%. That's where it goes off the charts. The analogy is that if we could represent our income and wealth by playing blocks, children's playing blocks, each block represents $1,000, most of us would have a pile that would go up maybe anywhere from 6 to 10 or 15 feet at most. But for that top super rich, this is Heilbronner's analogy, the piles of blocks would go up many times over the Eiffel Tower, many times higher than the Eiffel Tower. It would go out of sight. Fascism is a very rational system. It is an instrument by the ruling plutocracy to distract the people with the accoutrements of a false revolution. There's always a false populism, and there's a lot of goose-stepping, and there's a lot of manipulation of symbols and sentiments and love of the state and the like. Much of politics is the rational use of the irrational symbols. So fascism, the attention that when people study Italian fascism or Nazism especially, they focus on it as a kind of insane movement that just happened, carried on by this maniac Adolf Hitler, and the Germans went out of their heads and were led astray. In fact, what they tried to do is direct the real grievances of the German people toward irrelevant enemies.
Die Parteien versprachen den Himmel auf Erden.
And when the fascists came into power, they cut wages by 50%. They destroyed every labor union. They destroyed every opposition party and every newspaper, closed them down. They abolished all inheritance taxes for the rich or cut them drastically. They abolished all cartel taxes for the corporations. Pretty much what's being done here without having to go politically all that far. So fascism is an instrument whereby the plutocracy can control and hopefully affect a final solution to the class struggle. You totally shatter and destroy and enslave the working class, and people just have to take it. What substantiates what I just said, that fascism is an instrument of the plutocracy, is the way the plutocracy acted toward the fascists. Not just the German plutocracy, which gave Hitler enormous sums of money, which enabled him to go all over the country, but also the plutocracy of the United States, where all sorts of eminent members of that plutocracy openly supported the fascists. I'm a recovering academic, I call myself. I have a PhD from Yale that I taught for many years. I've been kicked out of some of the best universities in America because of my political activities and dissident opinions. It's not very interesting. The ideas are more interesting than me. There's a lot of wealth out in the world, and these colonizers did not just build empire for dominion's sake, they built them to go after wealth. So much of the world was underdeveloped to be reduced to a form of brutal extraction by the colonizers and the empire builders. Underdevelopment is imposed upon the country. That's what imperialism did. People began to be fascinated by the idea that they would be able to harness some of this power of nature. Instead of cringing before the power of nature, to actually harness it and become master of this power. It led to this process of material plenitude instead of material scarcity. It led to industrial capitalism. And with capitalism, you get a hijacking of this process. The essence of capitalism is to convert living nature into commodities and commodities into dead capital. And it reaches the point where finance capital develops means of just reproducing its own wealth with hedge funds. And while the whole country is suffering, these guys are making more and more money. The preoccupation of the super rich to do nothing but augment their wealth is a pathology. And that's who we've got running this world. These are small groups of plutocrats whose addiction is to make the world safe for their continued accumulation of wealth. These people are dangerous. The lunatics are running the asylum.
I hereby declare this to be an unlawful assembly. I order all those assembled to immediately disperse. No matter what your purpose is, you must leave. If you do not disperse, you may be arrested and/or subject to other police action, which could cause risk of injury to those who remain.
They don't want a country where the entire population is literate, articulate, has a high sense of entitlement. They don't want a country where working people like my father could send his son to school. They want us working harder and harder for less and less. The lesser your opportunities, the harder you will work. The real goal is the third worldization of everywhere. And so what we often hear is we need more activism and all that. But activism without political education and ideological education is just good works. We mustn't lose ourselves in good works. We should use the good works also as a way of advancing consciousness.